I do believe, that if we walk away from here and then don't address those unresolved issues, then we have a problem because we haven't fulfilled the objectives of this meeting. I think it's true to say the building blocks for success or for future success in the relative roles and responsibilities of the various components of the veterinary profession are well defined. I think there's a very good agreement across the room on the guidelines that have been prepared by the OIE under the guidance of the national representatives who support that. And I'd just like to say that GALVmed very much supports those guidelines. We definitely have a vested interest in seeing the success and in the proper application of those guidelines. It's not an area where I think the GALVmed in itself is going to be leading the charge. I think we have other, perhaps more fundamental approaches that we need to be taking, but we will definitely want to continue to be involved and to continue to have a seat at the table as these discussions progress, and to offer our support, practical and philosophical, in any situation that we can, where it's going to begin to address the unmet needs at field level. And that brings me on, I think, to my last point, which is that I think it's salutary to remind ourselves why we're here. We're not actually here to protect the veterinary profession or the veterinary paraprofessional profession. We're here because we need to have a system in place, a set of structures in place which protect the customers who we serve, the customers being livestock or animals in terms of the welfare and health of those animals, and the farmers who own those animals in terms of the economic benefit that they derive from it. We're here to try and stimulate that and to make sure that they are properly protected in the environment that we all work in. And it's not really, in my mind, acceptable to impose rules or regulations which serve the purposes of the profession or the professions, but don't meet the needs of the customers. It's just not acceptable that we say, you can or can't do this person, when in fact at field level the farmer cannot get anybody to do the work that needs to be done to protect his animal. And I think this maybe brings in an area which we haven't discussed, which is the whole risk-reward benefit assessment. And maybe I can just use 3 examples because there are different levels of risk in each of the things we're looking at. If we take an example like Newcastle disease, when it goes through a population, maybe wipes out 80% of the chickens in one go. Massive economic loss, welfare issues, mortalities in the chickens, loss of productivity, chronically infected birds. It's treated by an eye drop, typically. There's no intervention in the animal. It's a simple procedure, and the downside of it, if the vaccine isn't administered properly, is the bird is no worse off than it would have been if it hadn't been vaccinated. The downside risk is limited. Now, obviously, there's an importance in making sure the vaccine is properly administered, because the farmer, not least, should be paying for that, and he deserves, when he pays for it, to be comfortable that the job has been done properly and the vaccine has been administered properly. The costs are limited. It's maybe 5 cents a dose to put a vaccine into a bird. And I would argue that the downside risk associated with that intervention is limited. There's not a lot that can go wrong. You then move to the next level, which is for example, PPR vaccination. We're all expecting, hoping that we're going to see a significant program initiated, significant funding behind it, where there's for the eventual eradication of PPR in sheep and goats. That's going to need a lot of people to administer it. And the veterinary profession just does not have the means of delivering against that expectation. If we're talking hundreds of millions of doses of Newcastle disease to be given, we're certainly talking of tens of millions of doses of PPR vaccination which need to be administered, and there is not the means by which the veterinary profession in and of itself can deliver that across Africa. But of course, the level of intervention that goes on when you're injecting an animal compared with putting an eye drop is significant, and therefore there is a higher risk of things going wrong, of vaccines not being properly administered, and there's a higher level of training that needs to be administered or needs to be followed in order to be sure that a vaccine, especially in an eradication scheme, is being properly administered. So that perhaps brings in another level of training, another level of expectation, but still a large number of people that are needed. And then taking it to the other extreme, there's sort of the need for cesarean sections or interventionist surgery. And clearly that takes a very skilled professional, it takes a high level of competence, a lot of training, there's a higher degree of risk, there's a higher level of economic loss associated with it, and that can and should only be undertaken by properly, fully trained professionals.